Hey everyone, it's Radhika here again. So today we're going to continue our discussion of the MCAT and what it is really. So we're on this step where we're really breaking down the exam. And in this video, I'm going to discuss three things. First, I'll give you an overview of what test day looks like. Second, we'll delve into a little bit of a discussion about the science sections of this exam. So 3 out of the 4 sections happen to be science sections, and we'll discuss those. And then last, we'll talk about the passages and the types of passages that you can find in the science sections. So let's get started. Okay, so here's an example of what your test day schedule really looks like. And what you can see on this table is the types of sections that you'll find, the questions, the style of the questions, the scoring, which we'll talk about much later, and the time allotted to each type of question. So the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to select a date, you're going to register for that date, and then you're going to spend a couple of months studying for this exam. Now, when that test day actually rolls around, when you actually get to the test center, the first thing you have to proceed with is check-in. This is where they ask you for ID, certain centers take fingerprints, and the time allotted for check-in really varies. And the reason for that being is because it depends on how many people are writing the MCAT in the testing center that you've chosen. So if it's a small testing center with only 10-15 people writing the exam on the day that you are, check-in isn't going to take too long. Now, if there are 70 people writing the exam on the same day you are in the same location, then check-in is going to vary. So notice that in this total time here, listed at the bottom, that's 7 hours and 30 minutes, check-in time is not listed, so that's on top. Now, once you check in, they kind of guide you to your seat and you go through an examinee agreement where you discuss or where you read through certain texts that they give you. Basically, what it tells you is that you cannot share the information on your exam with anyone else, and you sign off on that. So I believe it's legally binding. After that, so that's 10 minutes long. After that, you go through a 5-minute optional tutorial. And the tutorial kind of tells you about the features that are available for you on this online exam. By online, computerized exam is what I mean. So it'll tell you the strikeout option, that you can highlight text. If you hit the exhibit button, that you'll be able to see the periodic table. Now, if you've done a lot of practice tests, full-length practice tests before, you'll be able to know these features that are available to you right away, and you won't actually have to spend time going through the tutorial. Once the tutorial is finished, you actually hit the first section. That's the chemical and physical foundations of biological systems, and it's 95 minutes long, okay? After that, you have an optional 10-minute break, and I definitely recommend that you take those breaks. Your eyes definitely need a rest from staring at this screen that is constantly putting light out at you. So it's black text on a white background, and your eyes, after 95 minutes of staring, really need a break. So after that 10-minute break, you hit CARS, the Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills section. We will not be talking about this section in today's video. We'll be talking about it in the next set of videos. It's the shortest actual content section, 90 minutes long, 53 questions. The biological and biochemical foundations of living systems is followed by a 30-minute break after CARS. Now that 30-minute break, although it's optional, is basically your lunch break. You bring your lunch, you kind of fuel up on that sustenance because you've only gotten through half of the exam and you still have half of it left. So once you take that 30-minute break and you hit the biological and biochemical section, that's like the first section, 95 minutes in length, 59 questions. And then you have another 10-minute break, which is followed by the behavioral sciences section. So again, like the other 2 science sections, it's 95 minutes in length, 59 questions, and this is going to be the psychological, social, and biological foundations of living systems section. Okay, so this is kind of what the content part of your exam will be. Now, after you're done those 4 sections, you've taken your breaks, you've essentially completed your exam, but not so fast. What you get is this option to void your exam. And this option is one very simple question, and it asks if you would like to have your exam scored. And it gives you two options where you say, yes, I would like to have my exam scored, or no, I would like to have my exam voided. And you have 5 minutes to answer this question. Once that's done, there's a optional 5-minute satisfaction survey, and the AAMC does take a lot of this information into consideration, so I do encourage you to actually complete it. And then, after that optional survey, should you wish to complete it, you're finally done. So your total content time is 6 hours and 15 minutes, and your total seated time is 7 hours and 30 minutes. Now, again, just a disclaimer, this doesn't factor in the amount of time that you required during check-in, which can range anywhere from half an hour to about 2 hours, okay? So just be prepared for that and make sure you take it into consideration when you're planning this day out. Okay, so now let's move on to our second part, talking about these sections themselves. In this video, I'm going to talk about just the sciences. That is the first, the third, and the fourth out of the 4 sections that will appear. We will be talking about cars in a later video. Okay, let's go on. The first section that you will see is called the Chemical and Physical Foundations of Biological Systems. This section is going to be 59 questions, which you have to answer in 95 minutes over a series of 10 passages. Now, if you divide that 95 minutes up between the 59 questions, that basically gives you 97 seconds per question. Now, I do want to offer you a little bit of caution here. When we're talking about 97 seconds per question, that's not just for answering that question. Remember, the vast majority of these questions are passage-based. So in those 97 seconds, you are also making sure that you're allotting part of that time towards reading the passage. So you have quite a bit less than 97 seconds to actually be able to answer that question. The section is, although it's the physical sciences section, it is going to be comprised of 30% general chemistry, 25% physics, which are your physical sciences. However, a quarter of it, just the equivalent of what physics will be, is going to be biochemistry. 5% is going to be biology, and a pretty significant portion here, 15%, is going to be organic chemistry. Okay? So, now in terms of what the MCAT actually tests, well, it's the skills that we talked about in a previous video. So if you haven't taken a look, go back one video and you'll be able to get some information about these skills specifically. What I want to spend a little bit more time on talking to you about is the format. I have now reiterated that it is 59 questions that you're answering through 95 minutes over a series of 10 passages. Each passage will be followed by 4 to 6 questions. Now, not all questions will come from a passage. Sometimes you'll hit a screen where it will say, the following questions will not be based on a passage, and you're just answering them, and they will most likely be retrieval questions where you've learned the information through your studying. Okay? Now, those 59 questions, the way they're divided is in a 3-to-1 ratio. 44 of those questions will be passage-based questions, meaning in order to be able to answer them correctly, you must have read and understood the passage, unless, of course, you had some lucky fluke. 15 of those questions will be independent questions. Independent questions meaning that if you had a strong study background, you would be able to answer those questions right away. They will not be based on information that you have to retrieve from a passage. Okay, so that basically sums up the physical sciences section, which is the first section that you see. Now, this is going to be followed by a 10-minute break, and then you're going to do cars. Once cars is done, you're going to have a 30-minute break. And following that 30-minute break, which you're going to hit, is the biological and biochemical foundations of living systems section. Now, this section tends to be the favorite amongst most pre-med students with a science background. The reason being is because some of us have taken so many courses in biology and biochemistry that this section kind of becomes the most familiar to us. And it's the one that we have, therefore, the most associated confidence with. So this section, thankfully, is 65% biology and 25% biochemistry. Therefore, 90% of the section is stuff that most science majors really enjoy. However, what the AAMC has done is added 5% of G-Chem, general chemistry, and another 5% of O-Chem. Because at the end of the day, the sciences are truly interdisciplinary. And being a practicing physician means that you must consider all of those sciences in cohesion, okay? So this is what the biological sciences section looks like. Now, in terms of the skills tested once again, they're very similar to what we've talked about before, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. So what I do want to tell you once more is that this division is identical to the physical sciences division, okay? 3-to-1 ratio, where 44 of those questions, 3/4 of the questions are passage-based, 1/4, 15 of them, happen to be independent questions where you don't need to know anything about the passage in order to be able to answer them correctly. 10 passages, again, followed by 4 to 6 questions in each passage, okay? And then the last section that you'll see is the new one. This is the psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior section. Again, it is 59 questions, 95 minutes, just like the other two science sections. And therefore, you have 97 seconds per passage, but you don't really, per question, but you don't really because you have to read that passage. The division of this section is as follows. It is going to be 65% comprised of psychology, 30% sociology, and 5% biology. Okay, the division is exactly identical to the other two science divisions. A 3-to-1 ratio between passage-based and independent questions, 10 passages, each followed by 4 to 6 questions, and it tests identical skills. Now, one thing that I do want to add here is that this section is extremely important. It's the new section. It's the one that we probably don't know much about because the test has only offered it for 2 summers. But there's an important reason that the AAMC introduced it. And it's because modern medicine, evidence-based medicine, lately has found that in order to understand well-being and in order to make healthcare decisions that impact patients in a positive way, we can't just use a biomedical approach. And the biomedical approach would focus on the hard sciences, mostly biology, physiology, biochemistry, organic chemistry, general chemistry, and physics. What they've realized is that there are other influences that are extraneous to those sciences that also affect a patient's mental and physical well-being. And in order to make sure that the quality of medicine practiced is the best possible, we have to start taking these other factors into consideration. So they turn to this more psychosocial approach, where they consider the psychological and the sociological foundations and factors that make healthcare a lot more complicated. Complicated because we are influenced in a way by those factors, and our well-being should essentially take into consideration those factors. Okay, so it's a very, very important concept. It's new, and it's consistently getting more and more emphasis. Okay, so now that we've talked about the 3 sections, what I want to move on to now is talking about the types of passages that you'll see. So there are essentially 4 passage types that you'll be able to find on this exam. Therefore, each of the 10 passages you should be able to categorize into one of these passage types. The first is an information type passage. Now, what we mean when we say information type passages are these are the ones that will test your ability to understand and evaluate mostly journal passages. So they will present to you an excerpt from a passage and then ask you questions based on that passage. Now, it's not reading comprehension per se, because you still need to have the science skill, the analytical and the critical thinking skills in order to be able to answer those questions correctly. Now, a second type of passage is a problem-solving passage. So the problem-solving passages, what they're out to do is basically test your abilities to identify causes of and solutions to various scientific problems. So these may be problems that you have been introduced to in your studies, or they may be novel problems that you may not know at all, but they want to see, can you identify what would cause this kind of biological problem? Can you propose some viable solutions? And you're not really proposing the solutions because it's a multiple choice exam. They're trying to evaluate whether a series of solutions that they've proposed, whether you can pick out the one that is the best. Okay. The next are the experimental or the research study passage. Now, when the change in the 2015 version of the MCAT, a lot of these passages are becoming more and more prominent, the experimental and the research study ones. And basically what these types of passages will do is they'll seek to understand whether you have sufficient knowledge of rationales, study designs, methods, results, and various experiments. So essentially, they'll be asking you to compare various hypotheses or various methods, or they'll even give you experiment A and experiment B and ask you, hey, if I was studying the following phenomenon, which one is a better study design? And based on the scientific understanding that you have, you'd be able to pick one out. And then the last type of passage is the persuasive passage. This is where they're really trying to understand and test whether or evaluate whether you have valid understanding of the viewpoints. So they may posit opposing theories about some sort of cell theory tenet. And based on what you know about cell theory, you would accurately be able to say, of all the theories proposed, this one is wrong because, or this one is right because. And again, you wouldn't be able to make those scientifically accurate and valid evaluations if you didn't have a strong scientific base. Okay, so these are the 4 types of passages. So I'm going to conclude this video here. The takeaways from this video would be that there are 3 science sections. It is the first section, the third section, and the fourth section that you'll see. They are truncated by breaks, which are most of which are 10 minutes long, one of which is 30 minutes long. And all of these sections have a equal division between passage-based and freestanding questions, where 3/4 of the question will be passage-based and 1/4 will be freestanding questions where you do not need to know or have read the passage. And oftentimes there will not be a passage associated with them to be able to answer those questions correctly. All of the passages will be divided over the 4 types that we've just discussed. And in order to be able to do well on all of these passages, understanding them, you still need to have a very strong scientific understanding and background. Okay, well, that's enough of me talking. We'll continue next time talking about the skills that the sciences test. See you then. Bye for now.